That apron looks good on you. Maid. Those were the words I heard coming from Jessica's phone as I finished drying the dishes in the kitchen. At first, I didn't understand. I thought she was watching some video, one of those things she always looks at on her social media. But then I heard the laughter. A lot of laughter. And I recognized my own back on the screen, my worn-out apron, my wrinkled hands submerged in the water. My daughter had filmed me without me knowing, and she had published it for the whole world to laugh at me. I stood motionless in front of the sink, the dish towel still in my hands. I felt something cold spread through my chest, something that wasn't exactly pain, but something worse. It was shame mixed with disbelief. It was the feeling of having been betrayed by the person I myself had brought into the world, fed, and protected for 40 years. Jessica was in the living room with her husband Mark, both of them lounging on my sofa, looking at the phone screen and laughing. I could hear them perfectly from where I was. "Look how many comments it already has," Mark said with that arrogant voice he always used. "I told you this kind of content works. People love to see things like this." "We're already at 2,000 views," Jessica replied, and in her tone, there was something I had never heard before. Pride. Satisfaction. As if she had achieved something important. The comments are gold. "Look at this one. Your maid looks really old. You should get a younger one." They both laughed, loudly, as if it were the funniest thing in the world. I turned off the water slowly. My hands were trembling slightly, but it wasn't from fear. It was something different. Something that had been dormant inside me for years and was now beginning to wake up. I walked toward the living room, drying my hands on my apron. They didn't even look up when I entered. They were still focused on the screen, scrolling, reading comments aloud, laughing at each one. "Can I see?" I asked in a calm voice. Jessica looked up, and for a second, I saw something in her eyes. Guilt, maybe, or perhaps just surprise that I was there. But that something disappeared quickly, replaced by a forced smile. "Oh, Mom, it's nothing bad," she said, hiding the phone against her chest. "Just a silly video for my followers." "Let me see it," I insisted. Mark chuckled. "Carol, don't take it personally. This is how social media works now. Everyone makes this kind of content. It's entertainment. Entertainment." That word echoed in my head like a hollow sound. I held out my hand toward Jessica. She looked at Mark, as if seeking permission or support, and finally passed me the phone reluctantly. The screen showed my image. Me, from behind, washing the dishes they had dirtied during lunch. The video had background music, one of those ridiculous songs young people use. And above, in big, bright letters, it said, "That apron looks good on you, Maid." I scrolled down to see the comments. There were hundreds. "Ha ha ha, poor lady. She looks like she's been washing dishes there for years. Do you pay her well at least? She looks like she's good at cleaning. Lend her to me for a day. That maid needs to retire already." Each comment was a small stab, but what hurt the most weren't the words of strangers. It was knowing that my own daughter had started all of this, that she had opened the door for thousands of people to humiliate me. I handed the phone back to her without saying anything. "See? It's not a big deal," Jessica said quickly. "They're just jokes." "Mom, people don't mean it seriously." I stared at her, really looked at her. Her expensive clothes, her perfect makeup, her hair done at that salon she went to every week. All paid for with the money I gave her. With the dollars I had saved for years, working from sunrise to sunset. "How much money did you earn from that video?" I asked. The question took her by surprise. She opened her mouth, closed it, looked at Mark again. "That's not how it works, Mom. It's not like they pay me directly for each video. It's about the followers, the views, the engagement." "How much?" I repeated. Mark got up from the sofa with an exaggerated sigh. "Look, Carol, this doesn't need to turn into a drama. Jessica is trying to build her career as an influencer. She needs content. And you, with all due respect, are perfect content for her audience. Older women, everyday situations, a bit of humor. That's what people want to see. Perfect content." I had become content. Disposable material to entertain strangers while my daughter racked up numbers on a screen. "I want you to delete it," I said, looking directly at Jessica. She stood up too, And now her expression had changed. There was no longer any trace of guilt, just annoyance. I'm not going to delete it, Mom. It already has thousands of views. People are sharing it. This is good for my account. It's my brand. I didn't give you permission. I live in my world. I use my space. I eat what I buy, Jessica said, crossing her arms. I think I have the right to make a video in my own house. Your world. Your space. Your house. Every word was a lie, but she said them with such conviction that I almost could have believed they were true. I almost could have forgotten that I bought this house 30 years ago, that every piece of furniture, every plate, every window was paid for with my sweat, that when her father died and left us with nothing, I was the one who worked 3 different jobs to keep a roof over our heads. But I didn't say any of that. Not yet. Fine, I replied in a calm voice. Don't delete it. Jessica blinked, clearly surprised by my response. Mark smiled smugly, as if he had just won something. I'm glad you understand, Mom, Jessica said, and her tone was now condescending, as if she were speaking to a small child. At your age, it's hard to understand how these modern things work. But trust me, this is good for all of us. I turned around and went back to the kitchen. I heard Mark whisper something to Jessica, and they both laughed again. I heard their steps going up the stairs to the guest room where they had settled in 3 months ago, when Mark lost his job, and they decided it was better to live with me temporarily. 3 months that had turned into an eternity. I sat on the small chair by the kitchen window and looked outside. The afternoon sun lit up the garden I had planted myself, the flowers I tended to every morning, the small lemon tree that had grown from just a thin branch. I was 70 years old. 70 years of life, of work, of sacrifice. And now I was the maid in my own house. The laughingstock of the internet. The joke of the day for people who would never know me, who would never know who I really was. But they also didn't know something important. They didn't know that every property, every bank account, every cent that was in this family was in my name. Only my name. That after my husband died, I learned not to depend on anyone. That every document, every paper, every deed was stored in a safe that only I had access to. They didn't know that the woman they had just publicly humiliated held all the power, and they were about to find out. The following days were strange, like living in a house that wasn't completely yours anymore, even though all the deeds bore your name, like being a ghost in your own life. The video kept growing. Every time Jessica came down for breakfast, the first thing she did was check her phone and announce the numbers as if they were trophies of war. 15,000 views, Mom. And climbing. 20,000. I'm getting messages from brands that want to collaborate. 30,000. This is my most viral video so far. I would nod silently, pour the coffee, prepare breakfast. I acted as if nothing had happened, as if my heart didn't clench every time I heard those numbers, as if I didn't feel the humiliation growing inside me like a poisonous weed. Mark had started treating me differently too. Before, he at least feigned politeness. Now, not even that. He spoke to me as if I were really the maid from the video. Carol. I'm out of coffee. Carol. This shirt needs to be ironed. Carol. The upstairs bathroom is dirty. Never a please. Never a thank you. And Jessica said nothing. She just looked at her phone and smiled. On Thursday morning, I went out to buy vegetables at the farmer's market. It was something I had always enjoyed. The fresh air, the bustle of people, the colors of the fruits and vegetables, a moment of peace in the midst of it all. But that morning was different. Mrs. Susan, my neighbor for my entire life, saw me from her tomato stand and looked away. She pretended to be busy arranging the produce. I approached her anyway. Good morning, Susan. She looked up briefly and forced an uncomfortable smile. Oh, Carol, good morning. There was an awkward silence. She nervously fiddled with the tomatoes. I waited for her to say something else. Finally, I couldn't help myself. Is something wrong? Susan sighed and lowered her voice. I saw the video, Carol. My granddaughter showed it to me. The whole block has seen it. I felt the ground move beneath my feet. The whole block? It's just. It got really popular. People are sharing it. I didn't know you worked for your own daughter. Her voice trailed off. Uncomfortable. I don't work for her. It's my house. She lives with me. Susan nodded quickly, but I saw the doubt in her eyes. I saw that she didn't completely believe me. Or worse, that she didn't care. I bought my vegetables in silence and kept walking. 2 stalls down, I heard laughter. A group of young women looked at me and whispered. One of them pointed at me discreetly. Another was filming with her phone. I quickened my pace. At the bakery, the young man who always served me with a smile now looked at me with something resembling pity. "Are you the lady from the video?" he asked. I didn't answer. I paid for my bread and left quickly. On the way home, every step felt heavier than the last. I had lived in this neighborhood for 30 years. I knew every neighbor, every shopkeeper. I had watched their children grow up. I had lent sugar and coffee in hard times. I had comforted widows and celebrated weddings. And now I was the neighborhood joke, her own daughter's maid, the punchline everyone was sharing. When I got home, Jessica was in the living room on a video call. Her voice echoed through the house, excited and sharp. Yes, exactly. The video of my maid. Well, she's not really my maid, she's my mom. But you know how content is. People love that kind of stuff. Yes, of course I can make more videos like that. I have plenty of material. I left the grocery bags in the kitchen, with more force than necessary. Jessica didn't even turn to look. I put the vegetables in the refrigerator with trembling hands. I took several deep breaths, trying to calm the fire growing in my chest. It wasn't just anger. It was something deeper. It was the accumulated pain of years of sacrifice that now felt like a waste. I remembered the day Jessica was born, how I held her in my arms in that public hospital, promising her she would never lack for anything. How I worked double shifts at the garment factory to pay for her private school. How I sold my only gold necklace to buy her first car when she turned 18. How, when her father died leaving us with enormous debts, I was the one who cleaned other people's houses, sewed clothes until my fingers bled, sold homemade pies at the farmer's market on weekends. All so she could have a better life than mine. And now she was using my image, my dignity, my name, as a springboard to get followers on the internet. That night, while they ate dinner and laughed in the dining room, I went up to my bedroom. I opened the small closet in the back and moved the old shoeboxes. Behind them was the safe I had installed years ago, when I learned that in this world, you can only trust yourself. I entered the combination, the numbers that corresponded to the day I bought this house, the day I became the owner of something of my own for the first time in my life. Inside were all the important documents: the deed to the house, the papers for the small apartment I rented out downtown, the certificates for the savings accounts, the will, everything in my name, Carol Benson. I reviewed them one by one under the lamplight. Jessica was listed as the beneficiary in the will. She also had access to one of the savings accounts, the one we used for shared expenses. Every month I deposited money there, and she spent it without asking. Clothes, restaurants, salons, trips. I had never questioned any of it. She was my daughter. That's why I worked, right? So she could live well. But now, looking at those papers, I asked myself a question I should have asked years ago. When was the last time Jessica asked me how I was? When was the last time she thanked me for anything? When was the last time she made me feel like I was her mother and not her income source? I couldn't remember a single occasion. I closed the safe carefully and sat on the bed. The house was quiet now. They were probably already in their room, checking comments, planning the next viral video. I took my old notebook from the nightstand. It was one of those hardcover notebooks I had used for years to keep track of expenses, recipes, stray thoughts. I opened it to a blank page and picked up the pen. I wrote slowly, in clear handwriting. The hardest lesson is not taught with yelling, but with distance. I read the sentence several times. I felt something inside me settle, as if a decision that had been floating in the air had finally taken solid form. I wasn't going to yell. I wasn't going to cry. I wasn't going to beg for respect. I was going to teach a lesson in the only way that truly matters, with actions. The next morning, Jessica came down to breakfast earlier than usual. She had her phone in her hand as always, but her expression was different. She seemed excited. "Mom, I have incredible news, she said, sitting at the table. A brand of cleaning products wants to sponsor me. They want me to do a series of videos using their products. They're going to pay me $500 per video. Mark came down behind her with a huge grin. Your daughter is going to be a major influencer, Carol. This is just the beginning. I poured coffee in silence. We need to make more videos like the first one, Jessica continued. The brand specifically mentioned they loved that one. They said it was authentic, real. So I thought we could make a few more videos of you cleaning, cooking, that sort of thing. I set the coffee pot on the table with more force than I intended. Are you asking me to act in your videos? It's not acting, Mom. Just be yourself. Do what you always do. I'll film, and that's it. And what do I get out of it? The question hung in the air like smoke. Jessica blinked, confused. What do you get? Well, living here, obviously. Food, a roof. This is my house, Jessica. I know, but we live here too. It's our house too. No, I said, my voice quiet but firm. It's my house. You live here because I allow you to. Mark let out a dry laugh. Come on, Carol, don't be dramatic. We're family. Family respects each other, I replied, looking directly at him. And you two haven't respected me a single day since you arrived. Jessica put her phone down on the table. Mom, you're exaggerating. It was just one video. That turned into 30,000 people laughing at me. That made my neighbors look at me with pity. That turned my life into your work material. This is how it works, Jessica said, raising her voice. Do you think other influencers don't use their families? Everyone does it. Well, I'm not everyone. I'm your mother. I stood up from the table and went upstairs without looking back. I heard Mark mutter something and Jessica reply in an annoyed tone. I didn't care. I went into my bedroom and locked the door. I sat down at the small desk by the window and opened my laptop. It was old, but it worked fine. I had bought it years ago to manage the accounts for my rentals and savings. I logged into the bank's system. My fingers trembled slightly on the keyboard, but my mind was clear. Clearer than it had been in months. 2 days of tense silence passed in the house. I carried out the basic chores. I prepared food, cleaned what was necessary, but I had erected an invisible wall between them and me. It wasn't a wall of loud anger or dramatic screams. It was something much more powerful. It was the wall of conscious silence, of the woman who has already decided something but hasn't revealed it yet. Jessica noticed it, of course. She would watch me out of the corner of her eye as I made breakfast, as if trying to read my thoughts. Mark, on the other hand, seemed irritated by my attitude. He was used to me being compliant, helpful, invisible when convenient, and useful when needed. On Saturday morning, when I came down to the kitchen, I found them both sitting at the table with strangely serious expressions. Something was different in the air. Jessica had her fingers interlaced on the table, and Mark was looking at me with that calculating smile he used when he wanted something. I poured myself coffee in silence and sat down across from them, waiting. I knew something was coming. I could feel it in the air, thick and heavy with hidden intentions. Jessica was the one who spoke first, using that sweet, careful tone she reserved for when she needed to manipulate something in her favor. Mom, Mark and I have been talking a lot these past few days. About us, about you, about the whole situation. And we came to an important conclusion. I took a sip of my coffee without responding, waiting for her to continue. We think it would be best for everyone if we make this official. If we stop calling it a temporary visit and accept that this is our home now too, we could even make some legal arrangements so everything is clearer. You know, put the house in all 3 of our names, or maybe create some kind of family trust. Mark spoke to a lawyer friend of his who can help us with the paperwork. There it was, the real reason behind all that forced kindness. They wanted my house, not just to live in it as guests, but to own it, control it, have legal power over what I had built with my own hands. Mark leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table with that gesture that was intended to be paternal but only revealed his condescension. Look, Carol, we understand you come from another generation, another way of thinking, but we're younger. We have more modern ideas about how to handle family finances. You're already 70 years old. You shouldn't be worrying about legal matters, property taxes, home maintenance. That's a lot of stress for someone your age. If you transfer everything to our names, or at least give us legal power, we would take care of everything. You would just have to enjoy your old age peacefully, with no worries. I set my coffee cup down on the table carefully, taking my time to process what I had just heard. It wasn't just the audacity of the proposal, it was the way they said it, as if they were doing me a huge favor. As if I were a senile old woman incapable of managing her own life, and they were the generous saviors coming to rescue me from my own incompetence. "And what about the apartment downtown?" I asked in a calm, almost casual voice. Jessica blinked, surprised I had mentioned that. "The apartment you rent out? Well, that could also be managed better. Mark has experience in real estate. He could get better tenants, raise the rent, maximize the profits. Right now you're charging way too little, Mom. You could be earning double if you raise the price." My current tenants are a retired couple, both teachers, who have lived there for 8 years. I charge them what's fair because they're good people and they take care of the place as if it were their own. Mark let out a short, dismissive laugh. "That's exactly the problem, Carol. You're too sentimental for business. Real estate isn't run with the heart, it's run with the head. If that couple can't pay more, let them find another place. There are thousands of people willing to pay a better price. That's how things work in the real world." The real world. As if I hadn't lived in the real world for 70 years. As if I hadn't survived the death of my husband, financial crises, years of exhausting work to maintain what was mine. They, who had never built anything for themselves, who were living off my resources while planning how to take it all, were talking to me about the real world. I stood up from the table slowly, holding onto the back of the chair. I looked at both of them, studying their faces. Jessica had that look of anxious expectation, as if she expected me to immediately accept their brilliant plan. Mark looked at me with that confident smile of someone who thinks they've already won. "Let me understand what you're proposing. You want me to sign over my properties to you, the ones I bought with my own work, the ones I've maintained for decades, the ones that are fully paid off and in my name. You want me to give you legal control over everything I own. And all of this disguised as help, as concern for my well-being, when the only thing you're concerned about is getting access to what is mine." Jessica rushed to answer, with that defensive tone she used when she knew she'd been caught but didn't want to admit it. "That's not it, Mom. You're not seeing it right. It's for protection, for security. What if you get sick? What if something happens to you? It would be a huge legal mess. If everything is in our names too, or if we at least have power of attorney, we could act quickly in an emergency. It's common sense. It's not greed. Besides, I'm your only daughter. Eventually, all of this will be mine anyway, right? We're just speeding up the process to make things easier for everyone. Eventually, all of this will be mine." Those words hung in the air like an involuntary confession. She wasn't thinking about my well-being. She was thinking about her inheritance. She was counting the days, making plans, calculating how long until I was gone, and she could have it all without any obstacles. Mark stood up too, walking toward me with that confident stride of someone who believes they have all the authority. "Carol, let's be practical. You live alone in this huge house. We're here, we're young, we have energy, we can take care of everything. Wouldn't it be more sensible for you to move into somewhere smaller, more manageable for your age? We could sell this house, buy you a nice one-bedroom apartment nearby, and with what's left over, invest in Jessica's business. She's really taking off as an influencer. With the right investment, she could triple her income in less than a year. That would benefit the whole family, including you." There was the full plan, finally revealed without filters. They wanted me to sell my house, the house where I had raised my daughter, where I had mourned my husband, where I had built every important memory of my adult life. They wanted to reduce me to a small apartment, as if I were a burden that needed to be put away in a drawer. And they wanted to use my money to finance Jessica's dreams of fame. I walked to the kitchen window, looking at the garden I had cared for so many years. The lemon tree was heavy with fruit. The roses I planted when Jessica was a little girl were still blooming every spring. Every corner of this place held my work, my love, my history. I turned to face them, and something in my expression must have alerted them, because they both took a small step back. "This house is not for sale. This house is not being signed over. This house is mine, and it will remain mine until the day I decide what to do with it. And that day, if it ever comes, the decision will be entirely mine, not yours." Jessica opened her mouth to protest, but I raised my hand to silence her. "I'm not finished. I want you to know something that perhaps you've forgotten, or maybe you never really understood. Every cent in this family, I earned. Every property is in my name because I was the one who worked to buy it. When your father died, Jessica, he left us nothing but debts. I was the one who paid every single one of those debts. I was the one who got up at 5 o'clock in the morning to work at the factory. I was the one who sewed clothes at night until my fingers hurt so much I couldn't close my hand. I was the one who sold everything of sentimental value so you could go to a good school, so you could have new clothes, so you wouldn't lack for anything." My voice wasn't shaking. I wasn't yelling. But every word came out with a weight that filled the room that made it impossible for them to do anything but listen. "And now you two come along who haven't worked an honest day in your lives, who live under my roof without paying a cent of rent, who eat my food, use my water, my electricity, my space, and you have the nerve to ask me to gift it all to you. Not only that, but you have the audacity to suggest that I'm the one who doesn't understand how things work, that I'm too old, too sentimental, too stupid to manage what is mine." Mark tried to interrupt with that placating tone manipulators use when they feel they're losing control. "No one is saying you're stupid, Carol. We're just suggesting. I want you to leave my house." The silence that followed was absolute. Jessica stared at me with her eyes wide, as if she couldn't believe what she had just heard. Mark's mouth was half open, frozen in the middle of his interrupted sentence. "What did you say?" Jessica asked in a choked voice. "I said, I want you to leave my house. Today. You have until tonight to pack your things and get out." They left that same afternoon, amidst yelling and slamming doors. Jessica cried, begged, accused me of being cruel and heartless. Mark threatened me with lawyers, with lawsuits, with making my supposed ingratitude public. I listened to them from my bedroom, with the door closed, without saying another word. When I finally heard their car engine fade into the distance, I went downstairs and walked through the house in silence. The house felt different, bigger, emptier, but also more mine, as if I could breathe again after months of holding my breath. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat in the dark living room, wrapped in the old robe I had worn for years, watching the shadows the streetlights cast on the walls. And it was there, in that absolute silence, when the full weight of my life fell on me like an avalanche of memories I had been storing in some deep corner of my heart. I remembered the day I met Robert, my husband. I was 22 years old and worked in a small fabric shop downtown. He came in looking for something for his mother and left with my phone number. He was handsome, charming, full of promises about the future we would build together. I married him believing in those promises, believing that love was enough to sustain a life. The first few years were good. We didn't have much money, but we had plans, dreams, that kind of naive hope that only the young can hold on to. When Jessica was born, I thought our family was complete. I held her in the public hospital, with its peeling walls and rough sheets, and I promised her she would have everything I never had. But Robert started to change. The jobs never lasted. There was always an excuse. It was always someone else's fault. The boss who didn't value him, the colleagues who were jealous, the system that was against him. Meanwhile, I worked double shifts at the garment factory, sewing school uniforms until my fingers bled and my back burned. I would get home at 11 o'clock at night and still have to clean, cook for the next day, help Jessica with her homework. Robert would sit in front of the television with a beer in his hand and tell me I was being dramatic, that I was exaggerating how tired I was, that all women worked and didn't complain so much. I stopped complaining. I stopped expecting him to understand. I just kept going because there was no other choice. When Jessica turned 8, Robert left. There was no drama, no big fight. Just one day, I came home from work and found a note on the kitchen table. It said he had met someone else, someone younger, someone who made him feel alive again, someone who wasn't always tired and bitter. He wished me good luck and said he would send money for Jessica when he could. He never sent a single cent. I sat at that same table where I was sitting now, the note still in my hand, and I cried until I had no tears left. Jessica slept that night, not knowing her father had abandoned us. I told her the next morning that Dad had to go far away for work, that he would be back soon. It was weeks before she realized that soon was never going to come. The years that followed were the hardest of my life. I worked 3 different jobs. In the mornings, I cleaned offices. In the afternoons, I sewed at the factory. And on weekends, I sold homemade pies. I baked in the early morning hours at the farmer's market. I slept 3 or 4 hours a night. My body was a map of constant aches. But Jessica never went to bed hungry. She never missed school for lack of uniforms or supplies. She never had to feel the shame of the extreme poverty I had known in my childhood. When she turned 15, she wanted a big party like her classmates were having. I didn't have money for that. I had been saving every penny I could for the down payment on this house, to finally have something of our own, something no one could take from us. But I saw her so excited, talking about her party, so thrilled showing me pictures of dresses in magazines, that I couldn't deny her that. I sold my only piece of valuable jewelry. It was a gold necklace my grandmother had given me before she died, with a heart-shaped locket that had our initials on it. I pawned it for $800, and with that, I paid for the hall, the dress, the food, the DJ. Jessica had her perfect party. I wore the same old dress I used for all special occasions and smiled in the photos while inside. I was calculating how many more months it would take to save up for the house again. 2 years later, I finally did it. I bought this house. It was small. It needed repairs. The garden was a mess. But it was mine. The day I signed the deed, I cried again, but this time from happiness. I showed the papers to Jessica and told her this was our future, our security, that no one could ever kick us out again. She was 17 and barely looked up from her fashion magazine to nod distractedly. When she turned 18, she wanted a car. All her friends had cars. She felt less than for having to take the bus. I was still working the same 3 jobs, but now I was also renting out the small apartment I had bought with a bank loan. With that rent money, and by selling some old furniture, I scraped together enough for a down payment on a used car that was in good condition. I gave her the keys on her birthday. She screamed with excitement, hugged me, told me I was the best mom in the world. She drove around all day, showing her new car to her friends. When she came back that night, I was making dinner. She asked what was for dinner, and when I told her just vegetable soup because I hadn't had enough for anything else that week, she wrinkled her nose in disgust and said she was going to eat at a friend's house. The years passed, and I kept working, kept saving, kept building. I paid off the mortgage on the house in full 10 years early. I bought another small apartment to rent out. I invested in savings certificates. I learned to manage my finances, to make my money grow, to be truly independent. Jessica graduated from college with a degree in marketing that I paid for completely. She got jobs that lasted a few months, always quitting because the boss was unfair, or the colleagues were jealous, or the salary wasn't enough. Every time she quit, she would come back home, and I would support her until she found the next job. When she met Mark, I thought things would change. He talked a big game about his plans, his businesses, how they were going to be successful together. They got married in a small ceremony that I paid for. Then came the startups that never worked out, the investments that were lost, the loans I gave them that they never paid back. And now, sitting in the darkness of my living room, I realized something I should have seen years ago. I hadn't raised a daughter. I had raised someone who learned that everything would be given to her without effort, that Mom would always be there to solve her problems, to finance her whims, to be the endless bank she could turn to without consequences. My mistake wasn't loving her too much. My mistake was protecting her so much from suffering that she never learned the value of things. She never knew what it cost to earn $1, because it had always just been there, available, with her having to do nothing more than ask for it. I stood up slowly from the chair and turned on the living room light. I walked to the small desk where I kept my notebooks and opened the one I used for personal thoughts. I took the pen and wrote with a clear, firm hand. The hardest lesson is not taught with yelling, but with distance. And sometimes the greatest love is letting them fall so they can learn to get up on their own. I closed the notebook and went up to my bedroom. For the first time in months, I slept deeply, without guilt, without fear, because I knew what came next wasn't revenge. It was justice. It was the lesson I should have taught years ago, and that now, however late, I would finally deliver. On Monday morning, I woke up with a mental clarity I hadn't felt in years. There was no anger in my chest, no trembling in my hands. Just a cold, necessary certainty about what I had to do. I got dressed with care, choosing my best blouse and the slacks I reserved for important occasions. I combed my hair meticulously and even put on a little lipstick, which I almost never wore. When I looked in the mirror, I saw the woman I used to be before I became a shadow in my own home. I had a quiet breakfast, black coffee and toast, while mentally reviewing the list of things I needed to do. There was no rush. Each step had to be executed with precision, without emotions clouding my judgment. This wasn't impulsive revenge or unnecessary drama. It was simply putting things in order, protecting what was mine, and teaching the lesson life should have taught my daughter long ago. At 9 o'clock sharp, I left the house. The bank opened at 9:30, but I wanted to be one of the first to arrive. As I walked through the streets of my neighborhood, I noticed how some neighbors looked at me with that mix of curiosity and pity I had learned to recognize since the video went viral. But this time, I didn't lower my head. I looked them straight in the eye, with my back straight and my shoulders firm. They could think whatever they wanted. I knew who I was and what I was worth. The bank was almost empty when I entered. The manager, a woman named Brenda Rogers, whom I had known for years from all my transactions, greeted me with a cordial smile and invited me into her office. We had seen each other so many times over the years that there was a certain familiarity between us, though we always kept the relationship professional. I sat down across from her desk and took a folder from my purse where I had kept all the relevant documents. Brenda watched me attentively, likely noticing the seriousness in my expression. "Carol, how can I help you today? I see you've brought several documents." I opened the folder and placed the papers on her desk in an orderly fashion. Bank statements, property certificates, the will I had drafted years ago, the documents for the joint accounts. I need to make several important changes to all my accounts and the structure of my assets. I want my daughter, Jessica Benson, removed as a beneficiary from absolutely everything. I want to close the joint account we have and transfer the entire balance to my personal account. I also need to block any access she or her husband may have to any of my accounts or properties. Brenda took the documents and reviewed them carefully. Her expression remained professional, though I saw a flash of surprise in her eyes. She knew my family situation, at least superficially. She knew Jessica was my only daughter. "I understand. These are significant changes. Carol, are you completely sure you want to proceed with this? Once these modifications are executed, your daughter will have no access to your accounts, nor will she be listed on any of your documents as a beneficiary." "I am completely sure. In fact, I've never been more sure of anything in my life." Brenda nodded and began to prepare the necessary documents. As she worked on her computer, she explained each step of the process. The joint account had a balance of $8,200 money I had deposited month after month for household expenses that Jessica used without restriction. All of that money would be transferred to my main personal account. The investment certificates, totaling another $23,000, which also had Jessica as a co-owner, would be modified to have only my name. We should also update your will if you want these changes reflected there. Currently, your daughter is the sole heir to all your assets. Do you wish to change that as well? I took a moment to think. This was the biggest decision, the most permanent one. But when I remembered the video, the laughter, the way I had become her ladder to social media success, when I thought about how she had planned to take over my properties without the slightest remorse, I knew my answer was clear. Yes, I want to modify the will. My daughter will cease to be an heir until she demonstrates that she understands the value of respect and honest work. In the meantime, I want everything to be placed in a trust with specific instructions that I will draft with a lawyer. Brenda looked at me with something that seemed like respect, mixed with curiosity, but she didn't ask any personal questions. She continued processing each document with professional efficiency. She explained that I would need a notary's signature for some of the more significant changes and that we could arrange that this very afternoon if I was available. We spent almost 2 hours in that office. I signé document after document. Each signature was an act of liberation, as if with every stroke of the pen I was reclaiming pieces of myself that I had given away without thinking for all these years. When we finally finished, Brenda handed me copies of everything and explained that the changes would be effective immediately in the system. If your daughter attempts to access any of the accounts or make any transactions, the system will automatically block her and you will receive a notification. We have also placed additional security alerts on all your accounts in case anyone tries to make suspicious moves. I thanked her for her help and left the bank with the folder of documents under my arm. The mid-morning sun was shining brightly, and I felt its warmth on my face like a blessing. I had taken the first step, the most important one. Now my assets were protected, shielded from any attempt at appropriation or manipulation. I walked to the small coffee shop that was 2 blocks from the bank. It was a simple place where I sometimes went to have a coffee when I needed a moment of peace. I sat by the window and ordered a latte and a pastry. While I waited for my order, I took out my phone and checked my messages. There were 3 from Jessica, all from the previous day. The first one said, "Mom, what you did was unfair. We just want to help you, and you treat us like enemies." The second, "Mark is furious. He says what you did is abuse toward your own family. You should reconsider." The third, "Fine, you win. But don't come looking for our help later when you really need it." I read the messages without feeling anything but a distant sadness. There was no remorse in her words, no genuine reflection, only manipulation, veiled threats, and that victimhood she used when things didn't go her way. I didn't answer any of the messages. There was nothing to say yet. My coffee arrived, and I drank it slowly, savoring every sip. As I looked out the window at the people passing by on the street, I thought about all the years I had worked without rest, all the times I had said yes when I wanted to say no, all the occasions I had put others' needs before my own, believing that's what good mothers, good women, did. But now I understood something fundamental that had taken me 70 years to learn. Loving someone doesn't mean letting them destroy you. Being a mother doesn't mean being an infinite resource with no right to dignity. And protecting your peace isn't selfishness, it's survival. I finished my coffee and stood up. I still had things to do. I had scheduled an appointment with Adriana Flores, my lawyer, for 3 o'clock in the afternoon. She would help me draft the new will and establish additional legal measures to protect my properties. I also wanted to consult with her about the video Jessica had posted, if there was any way to force her to delete it or at least protect my image from similar future abuses. As I walked back home, I felt something strange and new. It was lightness. As if for years I had been carrying an invisible weight on my shoulders and had finally set it down. My steps were firmer, my breathing deeper. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel afraid of the future or guilty about the past. I entered my house, and the silence greeted me like a hug. There were no demanding voices, no cruel laughter, no looks of contempt. There was just me, owner of my space, my time, my life. I made myself a simple lunch, chicken and rice with a salad. I set the table as if it were a special occasion, with the clean tablecloth and the good dishes. I ate slowly, enjoying every bite, without rushing, without interruptions. It was a luxury I had forgotten existed. After eating, I washed the dishes calmly, without resentment. This time, I was doing it for myself, in my house, by my own rules. I dried each dish carefully and put it away. Everything was in order. Everything was as it should be. 3 days of absolute silence passed. Jessica didn't call, didn't write, didn't show up. I used that time to reorganize the house, to restore the order and peace it had lost during the months they lived here. I deep-cleaned the room they had occupied, washed the sheets, opened the windows to let in the fresh air. It was like purifying a space that had been contaminated with toxic energy. On Thursday afternoon, while I was watering the plants in the garden, I heard the doorbell. My first instinct was not to open it. I knew who it might be, but I also knew this moment would come eventually, and postponing it wouldn't change anything. I left the watering can by the lemon tree and walked to the front door. Through the peephole, I saw Jessica, but this time she was alone. Mark wasn't with her, with his arrogant smile and manipulative plans. She was standing on the porch with an expression that was trying to look concerned, her hair perfectly styled and wearing a dress I had bought her a while back. I opened the door, but I didn't invite her in. "Hi, Mom. Can we talk?" Her voice was soft, careful, like when she was a little girl and had done something wrong but was trying to avoid punishment with sweetness. How many times had that tactic worked? How many times had I given in to that voice, to that little face of feigned remorse? "We can talk here." I saw the surprise in her eyes. She expected me to let her in, offer her coffee, return to our old dynamic. But those days were over. "Mom, it's cold out here. Can't we go inside and talk like civilized people?" Civilized people respect their mothers. They don't humiliate them publicly or try to steal their property. She looked down, biting her lower lip. It was another of her calculated gestures, the one she used to look vulnerable and awaken my maternal instinct. It didn't work this time. I came to apologize for everything that happened. Mark and I have been talking a lot. We realized we were too hasty. Maybe we were too direct with our proposals. It wasn't our intention to make you feel bad or pressured. Maybe we were too direct. It wasn't our intention. Not even in her supposed apology was there any real acknowledgement of what they had done. Just a careful minimization. A way of admitting a mistake without really admitting anything. And the video? Was that also too direct? Was it also not your intention to humiliate me in front of thousands of people? Jessica looked up, and I saw a flash of irritation that she quickly tried to hide. "Mom, I already explained that video wasn't malicious. It was content for my social media. All influencers do that kind of stuff with their families. It's normal in this business. But if it bothered you that much, fine, I can delete it. In fact, that's why I came. I wanted to tell you that I'm going to delete it as a show of good faith. As a show of good faith. As if deleting the video was a huge favor she was doing me, not the bare minimum obligation to correct the damage she had caused. But I knew that behind that offer, there was something more. Jessica didn't do anything without a motive. "What do you really want, Jessica?" She sighed, as if it pained her that I was so suspicious, so unreceptive to her attempts at reconciliation. "I want us to be a family again." "Mom, I want things to go back to the way they were. Mark and I found a small apartment we can rent, so you wouldn't have to worry about us taking up your space anymore, but to be able to pay the deposit and the first month's rent. We need a little help. Just $3,000. We'd pay you back as soon as Mark gets the job he's waiting for. It's a really good opportunity, a big company that's about to confirm his position." There it was, the real reason for her visit. She hadn't come to genuinely apologize. She had come to ask for money. Again, it was always the same. A new crisis, a promise of repayment that never materialized, a story about jobs that were about to come through or businesses that were about to take off. "I'm not giving you any money, Jessica." Her expression changed instantly. The sweetness evaporated, replaced by something harder, more real. "Seriously, Mom? You're going to deny me $3,000 when you have over $30,000 in the bank? When you have 2 properties generating income? When your whole life you've had money for everything except to help your own daughter when she really needs it?" There it was, the biggest lie she had believed for years. That my money was her money. That my properties were her future inheritance, and therefore she had a right to use them whenever she wanted. That I owed her indefinite financial support simply for being her mother. "I have helped you for 40 years, Jessica. I paid for your entire education. I bought you clothes, cars. I paid your debts more times than I can count. I supported you when you quit 6 different jobs. I financed 3 of Mark's failed businesses. And never, not once, did you pay me back a cent or give me a heartfelt thank you. So don't tell me I've never done anything for you." She clenched her fists at her sides, and I saw the mask of the concerned daughter fall away completely, revealing the real Jessica who had been hiding behind sweet words and calculated gestures. "You know what your problem is, Mom? You've always been like this. Always holding a grudge. Always remembering every single thing you've done, as if it's a debt we have to repay. Aren't mothers supposed to help their children without expecting anything in return? Isn't a mother's love supposed to be unconditional?" Her voice had risen, and now she spoke with that accusatory tone she used when she knew she was losing an argument but didn't want to admit it. "A mother's love is unconditional, Jessica. But respect isn't given freely. It's earned. And you lost my respect the day you turned me into your viral content. You lost it when you tried to take what isn't yours. You lost it when you treated me like a maid in my own house. So, what? You're going to punish me forever? You're going to let your own daughter and son-in-law end up on the street? Because that's what's going to happen if you don't help us. We have nowhere else to get that money. Family is supposed to support each other in tough times. There were tears in her eyes now, but I no longer knew how to tell which ones were real and which were part of the performance. There had been so many years of emotional manipulation, so many times she had used crying to get what she wanted, that even her tears had lost credibility. Family is also supposed to respect each other at all times, not just when they need something. And you two didn't respect me when you had the chance. Now you are living the consequences of your own decisions. Jessica wiped the tears with the back of her hand, and her expression shifted to something darker, more threatening. Fine, Mom. You don't want to help your family. You want to be the victim, the poor, mistreated lady abused by her evil daughter. But don't think this is over. Mark has contacts. He knows lawyers. We can prove that you're not in your right mind to manage your finances. A woman your age, living alone, making irrational decisions like cutting off her only family. A judge could declare you incompetent and assign us as your legal guardians. There it was. The veiled threat had become a direct one. They were no longer pretending to be concerned for my well-being. Now they were showing their true intentions. They wanted to have me declared mentally incompetent to take control of my assets. Try it. I have all my updated medical exams. My doctor can certify that I am perfectly lucid. My lawyer has complete documentation of all my transactions and financial decisions. And believe me, Jessica, if you try something like that, the only thing you'll accomplish is exposing yourselves publicly as what you are. Opportunists trying to rob a 70-year-old woman. She looked at me with a mix of surprise and anger. She hadn't expected me to be so prepared, so one step ahead in protecting what was mine. You've already been to lawyers? You're already planning how to leave us with nothing? Is that what a good mother does? A good mother teaches lessons, Jessica. And this is the most important lesson I should have taught you years ago. The world doesn't owe you anything. No one is obligated to support you, to finance your life, to solve your problems, not even your mother. It's time for you to learn to stand on your own, to work honestly, to value what you have, instead of always demanding more. She stared at me in silence for a long moment. I watched as she processed my words, as she finally understood that this time was different, that I wasn't going to give in, that there was no manipulation possible that would work. You're going to regret this, Mom. When you're old and sick and have no one, you're going to remember this moment. You're going to remember how you pushed away your only family. I am already old, Jessica, and I would rather be alone with dignity than accompanied by people who only see me as a walking bank account. She spun around and walked to her car without another word. I watched her drive away down the street, and I didn't feel sadness or regret. I only felt a deep, necessary peace. The peace of someone who had finally set boundaries. The peace of someone who chose her own dignity over the comfort of others. I closed the door and went back to the garden. My plants were waiting for me, the lemon tree heavy with fruit, shining in the afternoon Sunday. I picked up the watering can and continued my task, calm, centered, and free. 2 weeks passed in a calm I hadn't known in years. I got up every morning without the weight of others' expectations, ate a quiet breakfast in my kitchen, tended my garden, read the books I had bought months ago and never had time to open. It was as if I had finally gotten my life back after lending it out for too long. But that calm was broken one Tuesday morning when I received a call from Brenda, the bank manager. Her voice sounded serious, professional, but with an undertone of concern that immediately put me on alert. Carol, I need to inform you about an incident that occurred this morning. Your daughter, Jessica, came to the bank attempting to withdraw money from the joint account you had. When the system denied her access, she became quite upset and demanded to speak with me. I explained that you had closed that account, and that she no longer had authorization for any transactions. She then presented a document that supposedly gave her power of attorney over your accounts. I felt something cold run down my spine. A power of attorney. Jessica had tried to falsify documents to get my money. What kind of document did she present? It was a power of attorney letter with what appeared to be your signature, Carol. But our security protocol requires additional verification for these types of documents, especially considering the alerts you placed on your accounts. When we asked her to wait while we verified the document's authenticity with you, she refused and left the bank very upset. We kept a copy of the document and have already reported it as a possible fraud attempt. I sat down slowly in the nearest chair. This wasn't just a desperate attempt to get money. It was a crime. Jessica had crossed a line from which there was no return. She had tried to rob me using false documents, risking not only my assets but also her own freedom. What should I do now, Brenda? I would recommend you file a formal police report. We have the security footage, the falsified document, and my testimony about what happened. This isn't just a family matter, Carol. It's an attempt at bank fraud that could have serious legal consequences for whoever committed it. I thanked her for the information and hung up the phone with trembling hands. It wasn't fear I felt. It was a mix of profound sadness and an even deeper resolve. My daughter hadn't just lost respect for me. She had lost all moral boundaries. She was willing to commit a crime just to get what she wanted. I immediately called Adriana Flores, my lawyer. I explained the entire situation, from the viral video to the fraud attempt at the bank. She listened to it all in silence, taking notes. And when I finished speaking, her response was clear and direct. Carol, this is serious. We're not talking about a common family conflict. We're talking about an attempt at misappropriation and document forgery. I strongly advise that we file a police report, not just to protect your assets, but to establish a clear legal precedent. If she tried this once, she will try it again. She's my daughter, Adriana. If I file a report, she could end up with a criminal record, or worse. And if you don't file the report, she will continue to believe she can do whatever she wants without consequences. You've already taken several steps to protect yourself, but this step is the most important. It's the one that establishes that there are lines that cannot be crossed, not even by family. I spent the rest of the day thinking about that decision. It wasn't easy. Despite everything that had happened, despite the pain and betrayal, Jessica was still my daughter. The little girl I had held in my arms, the one I had cared for when she was sick, the one who had been my reason to keep going in the hardest of times. But she was also the woman who had publicly humiliated me, who had tried to steal my properties, and who had now forged documents to commit fraud. She wasn't the innocent child I remembered. She was an adult making conscious, destructive decisions. That night, sitting in my living room with only a single lamp on, I picked up the phone and called Adriana. File the report. Do whatever is legally necessary. The next day, I accompanied Adriana to the police station. We brought all the evidence: the falsified document the bank had kept, the security footage, Brenda's testimony, and my full statement about the events of the past few weeks. The officer who took our report reviewed everything carefully and explained that this constituted a crime that the justice system would take very seriously. Mrs. Benson, I want you to understand that once we file this formal complaint, the legal process will run its course, regardless of whether you change your mind later. Are you sure you want to proceed? I looked at Adriana, who nodded slightly, giving me silent support. Then I looked at the officer and replied in a firm voice, I am sure. My daughter needs to understand that there are consequences for her actions, and I need to protect what belongs to me. I signed the complaint with a steady hand. Every letter of my name on that document was an act of self-justice, of necessary defense, of a tough love that hurts but also saves. We left the station, and Adriana walked me to the same coffee shop where I had been weeks before, after my visit to the bank. I felt emotionally exhausted but also strangely liberated. You did the right thing, Carol. I know it wasn't easy, but it was necessary. What will happen now? The police will investigate. The district attorney's office will review the case. They will likely bring Jessica in for questioning. Depending on her response and the evidence, they could press formal charges. Best case scenario for her, if she admits to the attempted fraud and shows genuine remorse, they might negotiate something minor. Worst case, she could face jail time or at least probation and a criminal record. I took a sip of my coffee, feeling its comforting warmth go down my throat. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel satisfied revenge. I only felt the terrible weight of having had to come to this, of having to report my own daughter, so she would finally understand the gravity of her actions. Do you think this will change her, Adriana? Do you think she'll finally understand? Adriana looked at me with that mix of professional compassion and raw honesty that I appreciated in her. I don't know, Carol. Sometimes people need to hit rock bottom completely to wake up. Sometimes even that isn't enough. But what I do know is that you've done your part. You gave her opportunities, you gave her love, you gave her resources. Now you're giving her the most important lesson, that actions have consequences. What she does with that lesson is no longer up to you. I returned home that afternoon with a heavy heart but a clear conscience. I had done what I had to do. I wasn't the one who destroyed anything. They were. I just pulled my hands out of the fire before I got completely burned. The weeks that followed were like watching a house of cards crumble in slow motion. I didn't have to do anything else. Justice and life itself took care of the rest. The summons arrived for Jessica 3 days after I filed the report. I found out because she called me, hysterical, screaming that I had betrayed her, that I was the worst mother in the world, that how dare I report her like she was some common criminal. I didn't respond with yelling. I simply told her that she had chosen that path when she decided to forge documents and that now she would have to face the consequences of her own decisions. I hung up while she was still screaming. 2 weeks later, I heard from Susan, my neighbor, that the video Jessica had posted mocking me had resurfaced with a completely different narrative. Someone had discovered the full story behind that video, the fact that I was the homeowner, that she was living off my money, and that she had publicly humiliated me while I supported her. The story went viral, but this time in my defense. The comments that had once laughed at me now turned on her. People called her ungrateful, a leech, an elder abuser. She lost thousands of followers in a matter of days. The brands that had wanted to work with her canceled their contracts. Her dream of being a famous influencer fell apart as quickly as it had grown. Mark, who had always been so arrogant and self-assured, abandoned her as soon as he saw the money and opportunities evaporate. He left without even saying goodbye, leaving her alone in the apartment they had rented with the last of their money. Jessica couldn't pay the second month's rent and was evicted. I found all this out not because she sought me out, but because the news trickled back through acquaintances, through neighbors, the unavoidable hum of a neighborhood where everyone knows everyone's story. Part of me felt pain for her. She was my daughter, after all, and seeing her fall so low gave me no satisfaction. But another part of me knew this was necessary, that it was the only way she might, just might, learn something real about life. A month and a half after the report, on a Saturday afternoon, I heard a knock at my door. It wasn't the doorbell. It was a soft, almost timid knock. When I opened it, I found Jessica standing on the porch. But this wasn't the Jessica I had seen last. This woman's hair was unkempt, her clothes were simple and worn, and she had deep, dark circles under her eyes. She had lost weight. She looked tired, defeated, but also different in a way I couldn't immediately define. "Hi, Mom. I know I have no right to be here after everything I did, but I needed to come and tell you something before it's too late." Her voice was different, too. It didn't have that manipulative tone I had learned to recognize. It sounded genuinely broken, genuinely humble. "What do you want, Jessica? I just want you to listen to me for 5 minutes. Then I'll leave and never bother you again if that's what you want. But I need to say this." I let her come in, though we remained standing in the living room. I didn't offer her coffee or invite her to sit. There was still a necessary distance between us. She took a deep breath before speaking, as if gathering the courage to say something that was incredibly difficult for her. "I lost everything, Mom. The apartment, the followers, the brands, Mark. When the real story came out, everyone turned their back on me. People point at me on the street, yell horrible things at me. I can't get a job, because when they search my name online, the whole story comes up. I've had to stay with a friend who barely tolerates me, sleeping on her sofa. And the worst part is, every time I look in the mirror, I see someone I don't recognize. I see a horrible person who mistreated her own mother, who used her, who tried to steal from her. And I can't believe that person is me." Tears were streaming down her face, but she didn't wipe them away. She let them fall freely as she spoke. I came to tell you that you were right about everything, that I was a leech, that I never valued what you did for me, that I treated you like you were worthless when you sacrificed everything for me. I came to tell you I'm sorry, Mom. I am so, so sorry that I don't know how to live with this. And I'm not saying this for you to forgive me, or to give me money, or to let me come back. I'm saying it because it's the truth, and because you needed to hear it. I stood in silence, watching her. I looked for signs of manipulation, of acting, but I couldn't find any. This was different. This remorse felt real, in a way I had never felt from her before. And what are you going to do now, Jessica? Because apologies are fine, but you need a plan. You need to rebuild your life. I got a job at a coffee shop. I'm a waitress, clearing tables, washing dishes. I make minimum wage, and the tips are miserable. But it's honest work, and it's the only thing I could get. I start on Monday. I'm also going to therapy, with a psychologist who's seeing me almost for free because I explained my situation. She's helping me understand why I became like this, why I thought the world owed me everything. I nodded slowly. That was more than I had expected to hear. Not just empty apologies, but concrete actions. Real attempts to change. The legal case is still in progress, Jessica. The report I filed doesn't just disappear because you're sorry now. I know. My public defender says I'll probably have to do community service and pay a fine, maybe probation. I deserve it. I did something terrible, and I have to pay for it. I walked to the window, looking out at the garden I loved so much. The lemon tree was still there, strong and full of life. The roses were still blooming. Everything was following its natural cycle, despite the human storms. I'm not going to give you money, Jessica. I'm not going to solve your problems. That's something you have to do on your own. I didn't come for money, Mom. I came because I needed you to know that I finally get it. I understand that what I'm missing isn't money. It's respect. Respect for you, for myself, for work, for life. And that respect isn't bought or inherited. It's earned. I turned to look at her, and for the first time in years, I saw my real daughter, not the manipulative woman who had created a perfect mask, but the vulnerable, broken, yet finally honest person who had been hidden underneath all that selfishness. You're still going to suffer, Jessica. Rebuilding a life from scratch isn't easy. There will be days when you'll want to give up, days when you'll feel completely lost. I know. But at least now I know I can call you for advice instead of asking for money. And if one day you can forgive me, even just a little, that would mean more to me than any amount of money you could ever give me. I walked her to the door. Before she left, I did something I hadn't planned. I took a small piece of paper from my purse where I had jotted down some addresses. These are places that are hiring kitchen and cleaning staff. They pay a little better than where you're starting. Don't mention my name, but if you work hard, maybe in a few months you can apply. She took the paper with trembling hands and looked at me with eyes full of fresh tears. Thank you, Mom. Don't thank me yet. Show me you've really changed. With actions, not with words. I watched her walk away down the street, with no car, no luxuries, nothing but the chance to start over. And for the first time in a long time, I felt something like hope. 6 months passed since that day Jessica appeared at my door. 6 months in which I continued to live my life with the peace I had recovered, tending my garden, reading my books, drinking my coffee in the mornings without rushing. But also 6 months in which, without telling her, I kept an eye on her from a distance. I heard things through acquaintances. That she was working 2 jobs now, the coffee shop in the mornings and cleaning offices at night. That she had stopped posting on social media completely. That she was paying her share of the rent on time for the small apartment she now shared with 2 coworkers. That she was still going to therapy every week. I didn't seek contact with her. I didn't write or call. This had to be her path, her genuine transformation, without my intervention. If she had truly changed, she would prove it with time and sustained actions, not with momentary promises. One Sunday afternoon, while I was pruning the roses in the garden, I heard the doorbell. When I opened the door, Jessica was there with a small box in her hands. She looked different again, but this time in a positive way. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, her clothes were clean, though modest, and there was something in her expression I hadn't seen in years. It was dignity. the dignity that comes from earning an honest living. Hi, Mom. I brought this for you. They're lemons from my work. At the coffee shop, we were going to throw them out because they over-ordered, and I thought of your lemon tree and how you always make that lemonade I used to love as a kid. I thought maybe you could use them. I took the box and saw the fresh, yellow lemons. It was a simple, humble gift, but loaded with a meaning that no expensive object could ever have. Thank you. Come in. I'll make some lemonade. We went into the kitchen, and while I washed the lemons and prepared the drink, she remained standing, not sitting, as if she still felt she needed to earn the right to be comfortable in this house. I also came to tell you something. Mom, I got a better job. It's in a small office, as an administrative assistant. It doesn't pay much yet, but it's a day job, with benefits, and I can quit the night cleaning job. I was able to get it because my boss at the coffee shop gave me an incredible recommendation. She said she'd never seen someone work so hard and with such a positive attitude. I poured 2 glasses of lemonade, and this time I motioned for her to sit. We sat across from each other at the table where so many conversations had happened over the years. I'm happy for you, Jessica. Truly. I also finished paying the fine the judge gave me. It took me these 6 months, paying little by little, but it's all paid off. My record is clean because I complied with everything they ordered: the community service, the mandatory therapy sessions, the fine. My lawyer says that after 2 years with no trouble, I can petition to have it completely expunged from my record. I took a sip of my lemonade, watching her. She had matured in a way I never thought possible. Suffering, when it's accepted and processed correctly, can be the best teacher. There's something else I want to tell you, Mom. I've been writing, not for social media, but for myself. My therapist suggested I write about everything that happened, about what I learned. And while writing, I realized something important. You taught me the most valuable lesson of my life when you told me no, when you denied me the money, when you kicked me out of the house, when you filed that report. Because all those times, you were telling me something no one else had ever dared to tell me, that I was capable of more, that I could stand on my own, that I didn't need to be a parasite on anyone. Her eyes filled with tears, but this time they were different. They weren't tears of manipulation or self-pity. They were tears of genuine gratitude. You taught me that real love isn't giving everything that's asked of you. It's giving what's truly needed, even when it hurts. And what I needed was to fall, to hit rock bottom, and to learn how to get back up on my own. Thank you for loving me enough to let me fall. I felt something move inside my chest. Something that had been frozen for months was beginning to thaw. It wasn't that I had stopped loving her. I never stopped loving her. But I had learned to love her in a healthier, more real way, without sacrificing my own dignity in the process. You still have a long road ahead of you, Jessica. 6 months is good, but life is going to keep testing you. There will be hard times, temptations to go back to the shortcuts, days when honest work will feel like it's not enough. I know, but now I know I can call you for advice, not money, that I can come over for lemonade and tell you how I'm doing, that I can have a real relationship with you based on mutual respect and not on financial dependence. We finished our lemonade talking about simple things, about her new job, about the roommates she lived with, about an online course she was taking to improve her administrative skills. We didn't talk about money or inheritances or properties. We talked like 2 adult women who finally respected each other. When she left that afternoon, I hugged her for the first time in months. It was a different kind of hug. It wasn't me holding up someone who was falling. It was 2 people holding each other, in balance, with dignity. The following months brought more changes. Jessica continued to visit, always with something small in her hands. Bread she'd bought at a new bakery, flowers she'd seen at the market, once even a book she thought I would like. She never came empty-handed, not because I expected it, but because she had learned that respect is shown through gestures, not just words. A year after everything had happened, on my 71st birthday, Jessica organized a small celebration. It was nothing fancy. Just her, me, and 2 of my closest neighbors. But she brought a cake she had baked herself, and when I blew out the candles, she handed me an envelope. Inside was a handwritten letter, thanking me for every sacrifice I had made, for every lesson that had cost me so much to teach, and for loving her enough to tell her no when she needed it most. At the end of the letter, there was something else. A check for $1,000. It's the first payment, Mom, for everything I've owed you all these years. I know I can never pay you back for everything, but I'm going to try. Little by little, with my own work, with my own effort. I took the check with trembling hands. It wasn't the money that mattered. It was what it represented. It was the tangible proof that my daughter had finally understood the value of work, of effort, of earned respect. That night, after everyone had gone home, I sat in my garden under the starry sky. The lemon tree whispered in the night breeze. The roses perfumed the air. I thought about the entire journey, about the necessary pain, about the difficult decisions. I had learned that sometimes the greatest love is letting go. That protecting your dignity isn't selfishness, but survival. That teaching with boundaries is more valuable than giving without measure. And that forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting, but allowing both people to move forward with hard-won wisdom. The peace I felt in that moment wasn't the absence of pain. It was the presence of recovered dignity. It was knowing I had done the right thing, even when it was the hardest thing. It was understanding that sometimes the greatest revenge isn't destroying the one who hurt you, but living well, with honor, and allowing natural consequences to teach what words never could. I stood up and went inside, into my house, which was still completely mine. I closed the door with a quiet smile on my face. Tomorrow would be another day, with its own challenges and blessings. But I would no longer face it as a victim or a savior. I would face it as what I had finally become again. Carol Benson, a 71-year-old woman who knew her worth, protected her peace, and had learned that sometimes the greatest victory is simply to live with dignity. Because in the end, peace isn't found in getting back at those who hurt you. It's found in reclaiming your life, your name, and your right to live without carrying the weight of those who don't know how to value you. And that peace, I learned, is priceless.